our health is the business that we're trying to run, right? In this analogy. And I would argue probably the most important business, certainly as we start to age, that we will ever run, right? Because if you don't have that, then everything downstream of it's going to suffer.
Welcome to Married to the Startup. I'm Alicia McKenzie, a wellness entrepreneur and digital creator. Alongside me is my amazing husband, George, the CEO who's always ready for a new challenge. We've been navigating marriage and running startups for over a decade, and we're here to share the real, unfiltered journey with you. Join us for insights and candid conversations about integrating love, family, and entrepreneurship. This is Married to the Startup, where every day is a new adventure. Welcome back to episode 18 of Married to the Startup. I am your host, Alicia McKenzie.
I am the other person here, George McKenzie.
And today we have Greg Shindler, or the longevity CEO, which, I mean, could there be a perfect marriage? Like, I'm the longevity, he's the CEO, and here you are.
And get ready for a lot of longevity questions.
Awesome. Let's dig in. I'm so happy to be here. Thank you.
All right. So tell me a little bit about you, about your business. How did you become
the longevity CEO?
All right. So I was the CEO of a longevity clinic that I started down in Costa Rica. And so that was sort of the original origin, but I was speaking one time and a friend of mine was the MC and he said, "Hey, welcome to, the stage, my good friend and the longevity CEO, Greg Shindler." And I thought, "Oh, that's cute. That's cool." But then it kind of stuck and I started thinking about it. And so the longevity CEO has a little bit deeper meaning now. It really didn't originate this way. But the idea is that we all need to be the CEOs, or at least have the mindset of being the CEOs of our own health and longevity. And the idea is that Western medicine is not coming to save us, right? And so you guys will love this, I think, as entrepreneurs and CEOs and business owners. So imagine that we are the owner of our business with a CEO. We're tasked with creating the vision and then putting a team together to build a strategy and then put a plan to execute that strategy and then have KPIs and data points and metrics to measure how well our plan and our strategy is working, tweak, optimize along the way, scale the business, right? In a nutshell. But imagine that as the CEO, we outsource that vision and that strategy and that plan to a consultant that we talk to twice a year and only when there's a problem in the business, right? And they prescribe a temporary solution that is not a systemic fix. It's not going to fix anything that's systemic in the business. And they it's not going to fix anything long-term, but it'll kind of make the problem go away for a minute, or at least mask it. And then imagine that the three of us are CEO, CFO, CMO of the same business, but we don't talk. We don't share information. We don't share knowledge. We just sort of silo all of our data and our information. We don't ever really share it. I think we could all agree the business is not going to go very well. Yet that's exactly what we do with our health. We outsource it to a consultant that we call doctor and multiple doctors in some cases, and they don't share information. All your stuff is siloed. Nobody's really communicating, and we don't feel like we have any real agency over it. And most of it is always reactive. Something has to go wrong. The check engine light has to come on before we start looking for a problem. And then when we do try to finally get a fix, most of the time, especially with chronic illness and disease, it's a temporary, it's a mask of the symptom. We're masking the symptom instead of addressing the root cause. And so when I say the longevity CEO, if you start thinking like a CEO does, like I've got to have a vision. What's your vision? I want to live to 120. Okay, great. Now what's your strategy to get there? Right? So maybe I need functional medicine. Maybe I need a nutritionist.Maybe I need an exercise trainer. Right, Alicia, this you're going to be loving this.
I know. I'm eating maybe all of this up.
Advanced diagnostic testing like epigenetics and all this stuff. Maybe I need a breathwork coach. Whatever it is, you start to put together this team and you have this strategy. And then we use diagnostics, which labs, right? So all the testing, wearables, all the data and feedback loops that we can create these days, you put all that together and then you monitor, let's say every 6 months, whatever. It's always patient or individual specific. You monitor how well your strategy and your plan is working. Am I on track to get to 120, which is my vision, right? And so that's kind of where the longevity CEO went to, because as I was speaking in front of groups of people, most of them were entrepreneurs, C-suite, high achievers, high performers. Some people just looking to squeeze that incremental advantage out of life, that extra little something, and it resonated with them. You could see them nodding their heads, because if you get up and you start talking about cellular medicine, functional medicine, and epigenetics and biological age and stuff, I mean, at some point you're going to glaze over. So I said, how can I capture their attention, speak to them in a language they'll understand and resonate and relate to, while also getting across this really, what I believe is an important mindset shift or a paradigm shift in the way we think about taking agency over our own health and longevity. We don't get rid of doctors, but we need to start taking a little bit more ownership of that vision and that strategy, and then putting a team together that we feel would be best suited to implement that strategy to accomplish our goals and or our vision. So that's really the origin of it.
Yeah, no, it's a great analogy. I love what the CEO's role in a company is, and you're thinking of your life and then your health as that enterprise, setting that strategic vision. And then the old adage, you can't manage what you don't measure. And I think that's the biggest thing we do as people with our health. We don't measure anything other than the size of our pants, waist maybe, and our weight. And those are probably the only two measurements we really care about. And then we go to the doctors once a year, look at measurements, don't really know what they mean. Blood pressure, is it good or bad? They have no idea what the number is, and the scale is somewhat arbitrary. You take all the men in the world and say, okay, that range is everybody, and it should be perfect. And, you don't catch anything until it's a problem. So imagine running your business and you don't look at anything and you just wait until a customer complains and then you take 100%. Action.
It's imagine too, like in business, tools and, different ways of looking at problems and systemic issues. And to your point, George, 100%, our health is the business that we're trying to run, right? In this analogy. And I would argue probably the most important business, certainly as we start to age, that we will ever run, right? Because if you don't have that, then everything downstream of it's going to suffer. But in business, we've learned to use new tools and new ways of looking at problems, and imagine if we were using old, outdated problems yet in our health. Like you mentioned, we go and look at our blood pressure and certain biomarkers, which we still need to look at without question. But let's take an outdated marker, I think, like BMI.
Right? That was the first thing that popped into my head.
Right. I mean, it's an outdated marker, and yet for a long time, that's what we looked at, right? We were just looking at our BMI, and now we know, and it's different for everybody.
And even cholesterol is getting to be to that point, because there are several athletes that I know personally that have high cholesterol markers because their LDLs are elevated, but LDL is the good cholesterol, HDL is the bad cholesterol. I might have that reversed, but it's another marker that I'm finding is more inconsistent as time goes on.
Yeah, there's a lot of data that's coming out, Alicia, that's suggesting that. Agreed.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's that one size fits all metric. And imagine if you're running your business and you're a high customer touch business, and you had a customer satisfaction score of 95. That may be terrible. But if you're low touch and hardly ever interface with the customer, and it's a SaaS business, and your customer satisfaction is 95, maybe that's fantastic. But they're different businesses, so the measure and whether one is right for one or wrong for the other, it's hard to be arbitrary.
Sort of take off on that one size fits all. I mean, the Western medicine model is that doctors go to medical school to learn to diagnose and treat symptoms of disease, and we're talking really chronic, not really acute stuff right now. And then they come out and they prescribe some pharmaceutical target to mask the symptom of that particular disease and or illness, so that you feel better. You don't necessarily get better. And that really correlates well to the one size fits all model, because you could just see, these, and look, doctors, just to try to pay off, medical school debt and make a living, they got to see 200 people a day sometimes, right? In these practices, because of all the various reasons and the way that's it all been built. So there's not a lot of personalization. It's sort of, some standardization across testing and things like that. Oh, that looks like this. I'll prescribe that. Next, please. Next, please. And that's not going to get us into that last decade or two of healthy, youthful function where we age with grace and vitality. That's the part that we're really trying to focus on now, because I think I saw a stat where on average, the average American, average US citizen lives 11 years of their life basically sick in chronic age-related disease. And it's typically those last years, right? And nobody's signing up for more of that because we hear a lot about lifespan and going to 130 or 50 or whatever. But I say this a lot. If you cannot slow or reverse the functional decline of this living organism, then the period of time part doesn't matter, right? We functionally decline in our cognition and our immune function and our musculoskeletal function, right? Our mobility is critical as we age, and our sexual wellness and our aesthetics. These systems functionally decline over a period of time as we get older. If you can't slow, mitigate, and or reverse that, then the period of time part, A, probably won't happen, and B, nobody's signing up for it.
It doesn't really matter if.
Yeah. So back to your analogy, I guess, or the putting together that team to be able to drive the vision forward. Let's say that vision is 120 years. So what does that team look like for you, and what are the recommendations and what are the things you see are driving that forward, that vision?
When I get asked, like I was speaking in Philly at a YPO thing a few weeks ago, they said, okay, what is something actionable that we could all do today that we could take away from? Because I talk a lot about cellular medicine, but I said, if you don't have a functional medicine doctor, get one. That's the very first thing you should do when you walk out of this room, is have at least a functional medicine integrative care specialist. And the reason I say that is functional medicine is one of the fastest growing subspecialties in healthcare, and for good reason. They treat holistically. They're trying to get your body into a state, regardless of your age, to do as much of the repair process like it's designed to do as possible without relying on pharmaceuticals as a frontline defense, right? For chronic and potentially age-related disease. So functional medicine is definitely the first member of the team I would put together, because those guys are really good. A good functional medicine doctor is really good at supplementation. They know which supplements based on your blood work and your lab work. And when they start doing lab work, they're going to look at 110, 20 different biomarkers, and they're going to understand how they work together, right? And for your metabolic panel, your lipid panel, whatever it may be, your epigenetics, and they're going to notice something about you is unique, and maybe we should try this supplement. And they know the high quality supplements, which makes a huge difference, as you know, right? Absorption is a big deal when it comes to supplementation. So those guys are going to be your front line of defense to sort of help you do this and avoid that Western medicine model pitfall of just masking the symptoms with some pharmaceutical. And then they're also going to be able to look at your biological age, right? And a quick word about that. And y'all jump in at any time, because I will wear you out with this stuff. I love talking about it.
No, I love it. Keep going.
Yeah.
I'm like,
this podcast is about you and you educating the listeners on,
The big joke among my friends is, I'd hate to be the guy next to you on an airplane on like a 5-hour flight that goes, so what do? Right? You're like trapped in a seat. And that's happened before, in all honesty, full transparency. But so let's talk about epigenetics real quick. A lot of functional medicine guys that I know, they know how to look at your epigenetics, and it's a big deal right now. It's a big word, and everybody's focused on biological age. You see it from celebrities and everything else. And I would say this: in epigenetic clocks, and they're looking at how you methylate DNA. They're looking at 800,000 or 900,000 markers on your genome to see how DNA is being methylated, which DNA damage is the origin of the aging process. Okay. And so if you're looking at your biological age, how this organism is aging biologically versus my chronological age, or candles on my birthday cake, you're trying to draw a correlation between this DNA methylation and a cohort of people who filled out the same subjective questionnaire that you did and put you into this group, use this normalization method and this algorithm to come up with this age. And depending on where you fall, plus or minus, so I'm 57, my biological age is 48. So statistically, I am 56 or up to 56% less likely to die prematurely and get age-related disease. Okay, so that's it. If the reverse were true, if I was 65 biologically, then I would be more likely, right? That's what that means.
Yeah.
However, and it takes a while to see meaningful change in that number. And that number is heritable.
Yeah.
It goes back 4 generations right now. And there's 13, and I could be wrong about this, but the last time I checked, there were 13 epigenetic clocks, and they all weight different things differently. So there's a clock called...
there's no standard out
Well, there
there.
is a standard now. And I believe it's Yale has the latest sort of algorithm normalization method for looking at, DNA methylated clocks, measurement clocks, but the clocks themselves. So PVC Horvath was one of the original, and it's still very popular. There's one called a Grimage PC clock that weights sort of time to death a little heavier. And this is stuff where people come up to me and they'll go, "Hey, I'm 17 years younger biologically than I am chronologically." And they're all excited. And I'm like, "Awesome. What does that mean to you?" And this is where you get that deer in the headlights look, because they're like, "That's good, right?" I'm like, "Yes, theoretically, yes, it's good. But what do you think it means? And how did you do it? And how can you keep it there?" And then that's where people get really
Yeah.
confused. There's a clock called the Dunedin pace of aging clock. And it's exactly what it sounds like. It's your pace of aging relative to your chronological age. Or, so put it like this: you're either accelerated or decelerated in your biological age. That clock, we can see meaningful changes in as little as 8 to 12 weeks. So diet, exercise, stress, back to the team. So if you get a good functional medicine guy who's looking at this, understands Dunedin pace, and says, "Hey, Greg, you're in a decelerated state of aging. That's awesome. So maybe I'm aging 0.8 to every 1 year. I'm aging chronologically, right? That's good." Or if I'm in an accelerated state of aging, I'm at 1.2. So I'm outpacing biologically. I'm aging faster than I am chronologically. That's bad.
Yeah.
And then they can look at all the biomarkers and all the lab results and see my lifestyle, the way I answered those lifestyle questions. And they can say, "Okay, here's what we got to do. First of all, you got to quit eating pizza and fried chicken and drinking scotch and smoking cigarettes." And, like, we all know those things. I don't do those things. But,
I just got to do enough good stuff to counterbalance that stuff to get to that point
you
8.
start tweaking, turning the knobs that are, sort of holistic, right? And then they're going to be able to use an objective baseline. And this is where I'm a big fan of things like Dunedin pace, because we can say, "Hey, you were at 1.2, now you're at 1. All the things we implemented over the last 8 to 12 weeks are working. So let's keep doing more of that. And then maybe let's add this or let's do that." So that's why I say start with functional medicine, and you need good baseline data. You need to know where you're at today. And there's so much data out there now, either from wearables and or like Function Health, for example. They have 110 biomarkers, but you need somebody who can look at it and knows what they're looking at, and then how to make it actionable for you, because we're all different. We all come packaged with our own set of problems and issues and challenges. So that's the first thing. And then I would say, a wellness coach who can be a good nutritionist slash exercise physiologist, or somebody who knows how to put an age appropriate exercise program together for you based on your goals, whether it's lose weight, build muscle mass.
I'm going to live forever.
So what about
You're
all those
immortal.
the studies and the nomenclature around, hey, you lose lean muscle mass as you age, and it's harder to bring it back, to restore lean muscle mass as you get older. And as an older guy myself, I find it harder motivationally to do it, and then it's just not the same. You can't just go out there and rack up the plates, the 45s, and then just crank it out and build muscle.
Thank you for saying that, George, because I felt like I was the only one. I'm 57. I'm in the gym. I work out hard. I even weigh food on a scale. Like, and it is so much harder to put on that muscle and to keep it on. And to your point, that motivation. Today was leg day for me. And I got to tell you, I was in a hostage situation with myself, where my brain was, trying to negotiate with me while I was laying there. It was 5:15 this morning. And I'm like, I don't want to go. I don't want to get out of this bed and go do legs today. But I don't let it negotiate with me.
But you
easy to skip leg day. I negotiate with myself mid reps,
Yes.
like mid set. You're like,
Yes.
8's enough.
And you know what? I wrote a post the other day. I haven't just published it yet, but I wrote one about, like, are you the person, if it says 8 to 12 or 10 to 12 reps or 12 to 15 reps on your workout plan, do you stop at 8 or you go to 10 or 12, right? Like, do you squeeze every last rep out? And that could be the difference in a mindset of a person who, becomes elite or whatever. And I did the same thing. I was at 8 and I was like, I'm doing like back squats or Romanian deadlifts or something, and I hate them. And I'm like, 8's plenty. And I'm like, oh, but I'm not that person, am I? But maybe I am today. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. Today I want to be that person.
Yeah. So, on the team, so exercise, nutrition, all important. Yeah. And sometimes I know
Yep.
people that have a nutritionist an exercise, a trainer, a functional medicine doc, a breathwork coach, a somatic coach for, somatic therapy or whatever it may be. Everybody's different, whatever your needs are. But if you look at your baseline needs of sleep, exercise, nutrition, and stress, if you can take those things and build a team around you that can help address those and knows what they're looking at and is really consistent in measuring the impact, can't manage what we don't measure. You're ahead of 99% of the people in the game for sure. So I would say, and a
Yeah.
lot of times I'm finding you can find that nutritionist, exercise, stress person in one person. They're fairly rare, but
Yeah.
they're out there, and you don't have to have this cadre of people.
Maybe I'm the only one in the room that doesn't know, but what's a breath coach?
Breathwork coach.
I feel like we are all pretty good at breathing.
Breath work.
Oh, breath work.
Yeah.
Oh,
So,
okay.
there are people that really help you with, and I'm a big fan of breathwork. I came to it late in life. It's funny because one of the guys that I knew from film school, I went to NYU and he was an actor in my student film. We became lifelong friends. He went into breathwork back then. And like I said, I'm 57. So it's been a minute. And he was up in the Berkshires. And I'm like, people pay you to learn how to breathe. I'm like, I can do that for free, like all the time, right? Like I'm good at it and I count on it. And he would laugh and he's like, no, you need to check it out. It's really like, it's amazing. It'll open, keys to life and stuff. And I was like, yeah, okay, whatever. So later in life, I got exposed to it through more and more people. And I'm like, all right, I got to try this thing out. And I went through and did guided breath work with somebody who knows what they're doing. And it took me to this elevated emotional state that I've been chasing ever since. And it's hard to do it on my own, but when you have somebody who's really good at it, can guide you through it. So I think that's really what the breathwork coach is all about. And it's amazing. I'm a huge fan. Whether it's stress or sleep or mindset or maybe emotional nervous system regulation, breath is at the source of all of it.
Yeah. So as we go through the longevity CEOs, I know you laid out some good steps here, but I know everyone along the it's like diet. Everybody wants the easy button, and today it's the GLP-1s or the easy button for weight loss, and it's peptides are the thing that's going to take us to 120, and it's just I just need this vial of stuff that I can inject and lower my I don't know the terms like telomeres or whatever it'll help my cell aging and I'll live forever. And it's just this injectable and it's all about peptides. So I don't know what's your view on peptides and is it the panacea or is it the augmented that next thing after you've solved the base of the pyramid?
And I don't even think it's just the GLP-1s. It's like the ipamorelin, the tesamorelin, BPC, I think it's 157 that was just taken off the market and then put back on the market for the FDA. There's a whole just world of peptides that I feel like we're just now discovering. And I'm fascinated by it because there's things that apparently can it can increase the amount of REM sleep you get if you take this one peptide. I'm like, ooh, REM sleep? Maybe I should take it, right? So what is your thought as the longevity CEO? How far have you gone down the rabbit hole in the world of peptides?
First, I'm going to go back to George's quick comment about there's no easy button, and there isn't. And I tell people that, people would come down and look at stem cells that same way, right? Like this is going to be this magic bullet that's going to turn my, 40 years of living, poor lifestyle choices. It's going to just turn it around magically overnight. It is going to help. It is going to make you feel better, but it is not going to be sustainable unless you do all the other things we just talked about, all the lifestyle stuff. That's 80% of the battle. And it's always all coming back to the cell.
Yeah.
Peptides. So I'm going to quote a good friend of mine, Dr. Mike Stone. He's a functional medicine guy. And he said it best. If your health is the Titanic, peptides is the music that's playing as it goes beneath the surface, right? Like no. And he didn't mean it like he wasn't poo-pooing peptides. What he's saying is it's just one more piece. I call them puzzle pieces, right? And I'm a big fan of peptides because the downside is very, very low. They're very low risk, right? They're not going to hurt you. More than Samorelin and those kind of things have been around for a while. BPC 157 is good for ortho and joints and joint pain. The GLP agonists, GLP-1 agonists and stuff are really popular right now. They help with metabolic and curbing appetite and appetite suppression, as well as mood and some other cognitive enhancements. So I'm a huge fan. It's probably the weakest point of my game when it comes to really understanding all the different peptide. Well, there's thousands and thousands. You can't know. I don't think anybody knows all of them, but how they all work together and what's best and right for you. Some come in injectables and some come in oral, and there's some good peptide experts out there, and that's another person. If the functional medicine guy that you've got isn't a peptide expert, there are some out there, and I'm a big fan. Where am I in my journey with peptides? I've done 2 peptide cycles. I don't know if I just didn't give it long enough because I didn't feel anything tremendously different. But I also learned that they can denature very easily. So when you reconstitute them, and I travel so much that I don't think I was able, and I got one of those little diabetic ice pack things, that people travel with. And I think I probably denatured them. So I can't rule out that they didn't have enough effect in and of itself, because I can't rule out that they may have, been denatured and not effective at all. But I'm a big fan. I'm definitely very, very curious. And I think they're going to play a pivotal role in the future of just another puzzle piece for all of our health span.
Yeah, I feel like peptides are the artificial intelligence of the wellness world right now.
Oh yeah,
Right?
It definitely is.
There's thousands. There's a peptide that'll make you, tan. There's a peptide they have, yeah.
Really? I need that one. Jesus.
I mean, there's
something
what,
like that.
3,000
Yeah.
peptides that the body makes. And it's fascinating. I think we've only discovered like 300 of them.
But to George's point,
10%.
they're not a panacea. They're not a cure-all. They're not a magic bullet. They're not an easy button. They're just another piece of the puzzle that can help you get incrementally better until we accomplish whatever that goal or that vision is.
Yeah, you touched on it a few minutes ago, and I think maybe talk a little bit about your first company. And I think you said down in Costa Rica was stem cells. And what was the nature of that? Like, what made you go that route? And then,
So that's a great question. I had a little medical distributorship. My business partner and I, back in the 2000 teens, early teens, and it was okay. We had like 30 or 40 reps in 15, 16 states and selling stuff to doctors. And I wanted to try to grow the business, but I didn't want more people. I wanted maybe some more products in our portfolio that we could continue to sell to the Rolodex of 350 docs that we were doing business with. So I went to a conference. I learned about something called exosomes or biologics. And this is early. This has been a minute. And I didn't understand it. They might as well have been speaking that conference in Russian, because it was just, it was a lot of high level talk, but I understood enough to go home and start looking at a market study to see where this whole biologics trend was headed. And the CAGR was double digit. And you could see, all right, if I can get a small piece of this double digit CAGR, this growth that looks like it's going to happen in this market, that's pretty awesome. So I cobbled together a little portfolio and started trying to sell it to doctors. And I gave it to a couple of my reps that, because it took me, side note, it took me about 9 months to really figure it out. And there was a doctor who was at that conference, and I went up and introduced myself to him. I said, hey, I have this small little medical distributorship thing. I think this would be a really cool product for some of our docs, but I don't know anything about it. And I really don't know much about what you were saying up here today. He said, here's my card. Call me anytime. I love teaching people this stuff. And I said, do you mean that? Because I am that guy. I will call you. And he said, yeah, I swear I mean it. And guys, I wore him out for 9 months. He would be bouncing a kid on his knee at 7:00 on a Zoom call. He was up in New Jersey. And I was like, Doug, his name was Doug. I said, we don't have to talk tonight about this. And he's like, no. I love it. And I think the reason he stayed with me, because he could tell I was studying between our calls, right? I would take what he was teaching me and I would study it. And I'd come back with sensible questions and not make him just repeat the same thing he'd said before. And after about 9 months, the lights came on. So I got the products, put them in the portfolio, started trying to sell it to doctors, and it was just catastrophic failure. I assumed, and this was a rookie move as a salesperson, as a business owner, as anything, and I was not a rookie, so I don't really have a valid excuse. But I assumed when the doctors were nodding their head while I was telling them about it and trying to get them to buy it, to use it to treat their patients, that they understood what I was talking about. But they didn't, and they didn't learn it in med school. And so I made a really fatal assumption. Like, Like, man, these guys, I'm not, we weren't selling anything, and they just must not, they must not be buying it. Well, they didn't understand it, but they weren't going to tell you that, right?
Yeah.
Sitting in there, they were just going to nod their head yes
Of course.
until you left. And so, out of frustration, we and myself and a couple other guys, we'd use the products, and it helped a knee and it helped my left shoulder. I was a Krav Maga guy, so I was always injured and stuff, and it helped a lot, and where nothing else had. And about 90 days after that, I opened a clinic in Oklahoma City, you just doing joints, doing pain with some of these biologics, these products. And I had a doctor named Dr. Scott Waugh, who was a medical director. He was fabulous. He's a phenomenal human being. And we started getting outcomes because I was like, well, we know how to run a business. We know how to market a business. We just need a doctor. They frown upon guys like me doing the actual injections, sans the medical degree and med school training. So Dr. Waugh was our partner, started treating patients, and it was working really well. And we opened another clinic in Houston, Texas. Then the pandemic hits. So the pandemic gave us a lot of time to either work on the business, reflect on the business, or do something, because we had to shut down the clinics. They were not essential medical care. And 4 months into it, none of us knew how long it was going to last. So we closed them down and sent everybody home. That's when Costa Rica entered the picture. I was introduced to a doctor who had been talking about longevity, and I'm pretty well versed in the science of this stuff. And he was talking about concepts that I hadn't heard before. And it was like learning all over again, going back to those, the 7 p.m. Zoom sessions. But it was like further upstream. I'm treating things that have already happened. We were alternative to surgeries, basically, getting people out of pain. And it was really, it worked a lot of the time. But he was talking about something even further upstream of that, and I was intrigued. And so that ultimately led us to open that clinic in April of 2021 in Costa Rica, using mesenchymal umbilical cord stem cells as the primary mechanism, or biologic. And you could use them systemically. You could use them direct injections into joints and muscles and ligaments and tendons. You could use them for aesthetics, erectile dysfunction. There's multiple use with this MSC, this umbilical cord MSC. And so we started that business with very little funding. We were open 1 week a month, seeing patients, and then it was 2 weeks, and then it was 3 weeks. And by December of that year of 2021, we'd found our stride and our groove and our momentum. And we were telling a story that hadn't been told before, because we were also collecting patients' cells from them, and then you would store them. And there's 3 different types of stem cells that you collect through this process called apheresis. So you would mobilize billions of stem cell out of bone marrow into the peripheral bloodstream, collect them, store them, and then the idea is the patients come back and they get their own cells back over time. And so if you did this when you were 30 and you came back when you were 40, then you were getting 30-year-old versions of yourself, basically. Yeah. And you combine that with an allogeneic product like an MSC, umbilical cord MSC. And then you had the best of sort of all worlds. So that was the primary driver in that clinic. And then I exited that business in November of last year. And now I'm getting ready to, in June of next year, we'll open another one in Los Cabos called Kalel, where we'll be doing that, but a lot more and then a lot bigger. This.
All right. So when are we going to get our
I
stem
guess we're going to
cells?
Cabo, yeah. I wish I'd have known about this 10 years ago. I could have stored up my, 10-year younger cells.
No, so that's a great point. So this is where all the, and we can, so let's contextualize this a little bit for people who are listening. The reason we're hearing so much about longevity and the reason it's so exciting, well, some of the reasons, is that it's fairly nascent in terms of the diagnostic tools and some of the innovation and breakthrough that have happened. And the big one came in 2007 when a Japanese doctor named Professor Yamanaka, did you the
I
Yamanaka
just heard
factors?
about this. Yes. The Yakanaka. Yes.
He discovered 4 genes, these transcription factors, now known as the Yamanaka factors. And he took an adult skin cell and he reversed its age all the way back to an embryonic-like pluripotent stem cell. Now, for those people listening, this was a massive, massive breakthrough, because the idea is that once a stem cell, the reason it's so special is that it's the only cell in the human body that can differentiate into other cell types. So a lung cell or heart cell or skin cell or brain cell or whatever it needs to be. And that's why they're so special. But we've always believed once they differentiate it into what we call a somatic cell or a body cell, like a skin cell, then that's all it ever could be. And he proved that you could reverse that skin cell's age. Think frog to the tadpole, right? That's what let's take a frog and make it go back to a tadpole. So that's the Yamanaka factors. And he won the Nobel Prize for it in 2013, just 6 years later. Right. So, and if the Nobel Prizes typically don't come in, 5 years later, they're 50 years. So that's how big it was. And that's how it's really important for people to, and that set off all of this new school of thought. Like, whoa, if this is possible, what does that mean to us as biological beings? What could be possible here? And then in 2013, which is, 11 years ago, the first epigenetic clock was discovered by Dr. Stephen Horvath, called the PVC Horvath clock. And that started the whole epigenetic revolution that we see going on now, even today. Well, it's exploding today. That same year, the 9 hallmarks of aging, there are now 13 hallmarks, but at the time there were 9. Those were universally agreed to, that these are the hallmarks of how this living organism ages by medicine and science communities. They all said, yes, this is how it works. And it starts with like DNA damage and telomere attrition and intracellular communication or interruption of that, loss of proteostasis, mitochondrial dysfunction, all of these cellular exhaustion, cellular senescence. So they named all these things and they said, this is how we age as an organism. Side note, they also tried to now discover pharmaceutical targets to mitigate these root causes that they just identified. Let that soak in for a second. They came and discovered the 9 root causes, the hallmarks of aging, of how we age at the root cause level, and then said, okay, now can we get a pharmaceutical to mitigate the symptoms of, of these underlying root causes, which is just sort of how we think in Western medicine. But anyway, so that was 2013. And then 2021, the World Health Organization formally recognizes aging as a disease. And I tell people, whether you think it is or it isn't, meaning, okay, well, if it's a disease, it could be cured, right? And that's that whole immortality thing. And I said, this is not a new debate. This has been going on for 200 years. It doesn't matter if you think it is or it isn't. Enough people who go, like really smart people, right, who are thinking about this problem, go, okay, well, if it is a disease, maybe it can be treated. Maybe it could be cured. Maybe it can be mitigated. Yeah. And that's where innovation and breakthrough happens, right? So if that's the context of this conversation, of this discussion, of what I'm about to say next, George, in the long-winded way around to your comment, which is, wow, I wish I would have done this 10 years ago, right? All of this has happened in a fairly compressed time window, right? In the last 10 or 15 years. We can now take cells, and we've seen it done in the lab. It's not prime time yet, but we're probably only 18 to 24 months away from this, I think. And it's impossible to know with all the different labs out there working on problems like this, but that's a fairly safe assumption. We can now take your cells and epigenetically reprogram them back to 30-year-old versions of themselves, for example. We give them back to you. The theory is they will go back into your bone marrow and start making copies of their now 30-year-old selves. And then they will influence your 50-year-old cells to behave more like them. And so that's called epigenetic reprogramming. And it's your cells that they take out, they culture in the lab. It takes about 5 to 7 days. Then they put them back inside you. And the idea is that they should go back, because they are autologous, meaning they're from you. They should go back to your bone marrow and start making copies of their younger selves. That's the next big milestone. So if we miss the window, I did too, by the way. This is all fairly new. I'm 57. Yeah. So, if you miss the window, we're going to be able to reprogram them and make them younger and give them back to you. And they've already done it in some humans and in a lot of mice. So we know it works. It's just now safety and efficacy.
Yeah.
Wow.
Isn't that cool?
That's good. It's a bright future out there. Yeah, it is. It's super cool.
What else?
Yeah. So aging gracefully is no longer, it's a choice. You can take action. You can, own your own mortality.
You really can. I'm not I said it earlier, and I'll say this again for anybody listening. The definition of aging that I like, it's very simple, is the functional decline of a living organism over a period of time. Right. And I'll say it again. The functional decline of a living organism over a period of time is the definition of aging that I think sort of universally, resonates. It's not the period of time.
Mhm.
The period of time part gets a lot of publicity, right? From all the guys that you've seen, we know them all. You know all the personalities out there talking about 150 or 180. That gets a
Yeah.
lot of publicity because it sells. It's the functional decline part again that we have to go back to. And to your point,
Yeah.
George, that's where the choice comes in, and that's that whole longevity CEO mindset. You do have a choice on what's on that fork. You do have a choice of getting out of bed when you don't want to on leg day. You do have a choice of going for a walk and getting some sunlight and or doing breath work and or taking some time for self-care. All those things are choices, and they all play a critical role in your overall health span. And the older you get, the more important it becomes, right? And so to that extent, yes, but I don't want people to think and hear things like epigenetic reprogramming and stem cells and peptides and all these things and think, oh, this is, that's going to make me live forever. At the end of the day, you still have to do the hard work. You still have to have the right
Yeah.
mindset. You still have to get up when you don't want to. You still have to have some discipline. You still have to make some good choices. And look, I have a sweet tooth, right? It's probably if I do of the any of the it's the unhealthiest thing I do is I love like Ben and Jerry's half baked or something, right? Now, I'm not going to stop eating ice cream because if I'm going to live a long time, what for if I'm not going to enjoy some of the simple things in life like that? But I'm also not going to eat it every day, right? I'm going to use it in
Yeah.
moderation, and I'm going to either for a celebration or on a Sunday cheat day. And I'm not going to eat the whole pint in one sitting, but I am going to go ahead and continue to enjoy things. And I know that when I put that sugar into my body, I am creating inflammation. And it may be a good time to offer a really simple explanation of all these things we've talked about, because I hope this ties it together in everybody's mind. At the end of the day, it will be inflammation that kills us all if we live long enough. We call it old age, but it's inflammation by any other name. Your body starts to become, your muscles, ligaments, your muscles, tissues, and organs start to become so inflamed that they shut down. And our bodies don't repair and fight that inflammation in our 70s and 80s like it does in our 20s and 30s and 40s and 50s and so on. And so inflammation is something that we're in a constant state of fighting and or regulating our entire lives. Some of it's good. It initiates the healing cascade. Too much of it will kill us. So when you start thinking about things like sleep and exercise and mindset and stress and food, it's inflammation. When I eat ice cream, I'm manufacturing inflammation into my body for sure, right? Some food either fights inflammation or contributes to it. Lack of sleep, it's the only time our bodies recover and the only time our brains detoxify. Inflammation. Exercise, inflammation. Stress, inflammation, right? So if you want to think about it in a global way, it's just, are you doing things? Are you making choices that are going to help, control and or regulate inflammation in your body? And that's where the power of choice starts to come in. And that's where things like cellular medicine with stem cells reduce systemic inflammation in the body. They're going to go where they're needed. And so they augment this natural process that we start to suck at as we get older. Like our bodies are really good between 20 and 40. We're most optimized as a human. But once we cross over that
Yeah.
threshold, we start to see changes in the genes being expressed and therefore the proteins being made to carry out all the functions in our bodies. And we get worse and worse and worse at it, or less efficient and effective as we start to age. And that's where you need to be even more mindful about those choices and then consider parts of your strategy that may include cellular medicine or may include breath work or may include peptides. Or so that's, hopefully that kind of encapsulates it a little bit for people out there that are trying to get their head around this.
Yeah, no, it's been a great discussion so far. And one thing I'm going to steal from you, I loved it, is you said health span versus lifespan. And I think that I'm going to use that as my own mantra now. It's not, if your lifespan is really long, but the last 20 years are, unhealthy, and you're living in pain and inflammation and struggling to be alive, like it's not living, right? So that's the health span, that what we're all shooting for, I'd hope, is I want a long health span.
100%. One of my buddies, a doc, talks about, we talk about longevity and a lot. And he said, look, I don't like the word. I'm like, why? And he's kind of in your camp. He's like, I want people to be healthy and happy right now. And if we do that enough days in a row long enough, then I think this lifespan part starts to improve and takes care of itself. And there's a lot of wisdom in that. It's this health span, because you're right. If we can live another decade, but we lose our mobility, or we lose our cognition, or we lose our immune function, and nobody, who wants to do that? Nobody.
Exactly. It's not living. It's
But I
existing.
think there's a cause and effect relationship there. If you improve your health span, then there should be a direct impact on your lifespan.
Yeah. I don't want to take too much of your time. We might not have to do a second, podcast episode with you. It's been fantastic.
Fire away. I realize we're bumping up at 45 minutes, but I'm here.
Yeah, no, I feel like this is just the tip of the iceberg,
Exactly.
because it's all so fascinating, and then the landscape is ever changing.
It is an exciting time to be alive. I thought, when I describe longevity, I say, it's a big, Marvin Minsky called artificial intelligence a suitcase word, because it's just this, you use it, it unpacks all this stuff. And I think longevity is the same way, because it's an economy, it's a lifestyle, it's a science, it's all these different things. It means a lot to different people. It means it's something different to a doctor than it does to maybe us as lay people. But I think at the end of the day, the breakthroughs that are happening, what's coming with gene editing and some of the epigenetic reprogramming, there's people out there that will talk about, we're maybe a decade away from being able to reprogram our cells in vivo, meaning you would take a pill and it would do it whatever, had to take your cells out, right? And I don't know if that's true or not, but if it is, this is the time in human history that it's going to be possible, just because of so much innovation and breakthrough. And I will also frame it like this, quickly, is that I call it an aging crisis. And here's what I mean. By 2030, 1 in 6 people in the US will be over the age of 60. Now, that's never happened before in the history of man. That percentage, such a large percentage of the plus 60 population has existed. And there's why it's a problem. Is that as we get older, our healthcare needs become more complex. Yeah. And we're going to put a bigger burden on our financial resources, our healthcare resources, and the family units. And so there's a lot of people who would argue we're not ready for that. We're from an infrastructure standpoint, from a knowledge standpoint, we're not ready for that many people over the age of 60. And it gets scarier, because by 2050, 2.1 billion people on the planet will be over the age of 60, which has also never happened before. So it's one of the reasons I call it an aging crisis. And these breakthroughs that are happening now, that we're out of this exciting, scientific, advancement that's happening, is happening at a great time. And it's another reason that you're seeing a lot of effort, capital, resources, intellectual capital being poured into studying and learning more about this and trying to create even greater breakthroughs, because there's a big problem we need to solve. We have to help people age better. We have to increase that health span in that last decade or two, or we're going to have a big catastrophic problem on our hands when it comes to that many people being sick in that part of the population. And with a declining birth rate, that's a whole other kettle of fish, right?
Yeah, you couple that, and there's not enough people to take care of the aging population.
And paying into the system to support all the, because healthcare is expensive. PJ O'Rourke's my favorite saying is, if you think healthcare is expensive now, wait till it's free.
That's a great one.
But yeah, so Alicia, to your point, it's super exciting time, and there's a lot of neat stuff coming out. There's conferences on top of conferences, and some of the smartest people in the world. If anybody's listening who really wants to try to understand like how serious and we haven't even talked about AI, right? When AI is learning the language of biology as we speak. And when you layer that in, everything from simulating clinical trials that would ordinarily take 8 or 10 years, we can start to simulate them in a fraction of the time, to starting to just scour the Earth's, data resources for publications and peer-reviewed studies on, I don't know, pick something, metformin or epigenetics or whatever, and pull all that data on a daily basis, assimilate it, summarize it, analyze it, summarize it, and then present it to the PhDs in some of the world's top universities. That's advancing this. They're saying that what we learn our knowledge doubles every 57 days, I think is the number. I could be wrong. But like, it's this exponential increase in knowledge and scientific breakthrough. So it's really exciting.
Yeah. So I think we asked every guest, and you had some great stories around I think was you were talking that you've done sales long enough, and then you still made the mistake when you were talking to the doctors of assuming that they knew what you were talking about because you assumed they were smarter than you, and they're doctors and they're obviously intelligent. And if they shake their head, that means they know, because God forbid, everyone's afraid to admit they don't know something. But one, what piece of advice would you have for entrepreneurs or people that are starting a business? And then secondarily to that, what's the worst business advice you were ever given?
So the first thing that I would say to a young entrepreneur is don't be afraid to fail. I've learned more from the failures, and you're going to have them if you're trying hard enough and you're swinging for the fences and you're trying to do something big and bold and ambitious. Don't be afraid to fail. And I would couple that with make sure that if you are going to launch a business as a young entrepreneur, it is going to consume you. I mean, the name of this podcast is Married to the Startup. You guys know, we both know, or the three of us know, it is going to consume you. It is going to become all that you do, think about, live, and breathe. And so it should have a lot of purpose behind it and or meaning to you, because there will come moments when, burnout and fatigue and deal fatigue and all those things will set in. You'll question every decision you've ever made in your life, as a young entrepreneur starting a business. So A, don't be afraid to fail, and B, have some purpose behind it. Make sure it's something that you want to go into, that, and be married to, because that's what's going to happen and what it's going to take. I would say the worst business advice I was ever given. Wow. How do you put that one? My brain is going back through people. And I'm like, ooh, I don't want to do that. I would say the worst business advice that I was probably given would be probably around, I didn't understand the importance of culture in a business early on. I just assumed everybody thought the same way. We were all, as enthusiastic and passionate about whatever the business was that we were doing. And so it was, just, I overlooked culture, and I would say that 80-20 rule, really was applicable inside that in terms of metrics, right? I remember as a young entrepreneur, I had this little call center that I'd started up, and I had like 25 people in it, and we kept a scoreboard, and I would try to spend a lot of time with the C and D players to make them be A and B players. And I learned the hard way that you can't do that. And your A and B players will resent you and leave. And so the culture that I had created inside there, I thought I was being a good coach or a mentor or whatever by spending more time with these guys that were less than 20% of the revenue in the business, and 80% of the revenue I was neglecting and ignoring. And I was told, no, that's right. That's what you ought to be doing. That's how you do it. And, culture's overrated and all that. And that business failed. It wound up going out of business. And I have since doubled down on the importance of culture. I cannot overstate it. When people are excited and thank God it's Monday kind of mentality, they love when they're going to work and where they're working and who they're working with and the empowerment that they feel in their jobs. That's when magic happens, in my opinion. So worst piece of advice was that culture was overrated and not that important. And I learned that lesson the hard way.
Yeah, that's great. I think that how true that statement is, and a lot of the private equity or money guys or people that aren't operators, how easy it is to cut the spend on culture, because you just take it for granted, A, that it'll always be there, or B, you don't think it's important.
100%. There's a great book that I read by Daniel Coyle called The Culture Code. He wrote The Talent Code and several other books. And if anybody out there is intrigued by that, The Culture Code is a phenomenal read. And it really talks about how you can look at great companies like maybe Apple or Google, and they have these great cultures, and it looks easy. It looks almost automatic. And anybody that's ever really focused on culture inside a business, big or small, knows how difficult it really is and how intentional you have to be about protecting a healthy culture at all times and at all costs, because your A players expect it and demand it. And if you want to surround yourself with A players, culture to me is everything.
Agreed.
All right, Greg, this has been amazing. Where can people find you?
So gregshindler.com is GREGSH. There's no C in it. Everybody does it. SHINDLER.com. And then The new clinic's called Colel Health, and that's COLEL health.com. There's not much up there right now, but a landing page. The clinic's under construction in Los Cabos. You guys have to come down. The four of us have to go down.
Sure.
It's already mentally on my calendar.
Grand opening.
June of 2025.
So Colel Health.
Right.
And Colel is the Mayan goddess of bees. So that's where that name comes from, which is the giver of life. So that's kind of the idea behind Colel as the clinic name in Cabo. But yeah, either Colel Health or gregshindler.com.
Amazing. Thank you so much for coming on. This has been fascinating. And
Yes.
I mean, I feel like we need to go out to dinner now so we can talk more.
And and again, tap out at any time. I wear people out with this stuff. I love talking about it. And it's exciting. It really is. So thank you very much for letting me come on here and ramble, talk.
No, thank you.
Thank you for tuning in to Married to the Startup. We hope you enjoyed today's episode. If you did, please take a moment to like, rate, and subscribe to our podcast. Your support helps us reach more people and keeps the conversation going. If you have any questions or topics you'd like us to cover, drop me a message. I love hearing from you guys. Until next time.
George, out.